I was rather internet savvy when I was younger. I was always watching YouTube, and most of the time was used to look into video games. And when you're on the internet in 2012, you'll very quickly find that there's 3 games considered to be the best of all time. There's probably more, but these stuck out to me. There was Ocarina of Time, the legendary transition from 2D to 3D that the Zelda series had. Mario 64, a game that was one of the first 3D platformers to promote an open world design. And, of course, Final Fantasy VII. Hey, don't touch that, I'm not done. Now, judging by the title, and how I mentioned it last in a list of 3, Final Fantasy VII stood out to me. Now, when I was in 3rd grade, the only RPG I ever knew was Pokemon, a simple one-on-one turn-based game. When I looked into Final Fantasy VII, I'd never seen anybody controlling 3 characters at once, and I thought it looked rather complicated. Why was this, of all things, considered to be one of the best games of all time? Not having any sort of console to play it on, it went to the back of my mind until early 2015. I had a PlayStation 3 by then, and I was having a blast playing old games on it. Mega Man X4 was probably my favorite. Then I remembered, hey, I could try out the supposed best game ever made for only $10. Might as well. I waited for the download to finish, and I started playing what was going to be my favorite game of all time. I was already somewhat familiar with it. I knew the main character was named Cloud, and he used a giant sword. Sephiroth was the guy with the long silver hair, who eventually killed off some flower girl who I didn't know about, and that Cloud killed him using a flashy attack called the Omni Slash. But other than that, I didn't really know all that much. I was blown away by how amazing the opening was. We start off small, focusing on one individual girl, and slowly panning out to see the giant city of Midgar, with the music reaching a high point as the title of the game, Final Fantasy VII, flashed across the screen. We zoom in on an entirely different part of the city and see people jumping out of a train, taking out some guards. We see our heroes, Cloud and Barret, are on a mission to blow up a reactor, sucking the life out of the planet to power the city. Now that's one way to start off your game, a sneaky sabotage mission to blow up a reactor, accompanied by some amazing music fitting the situation perfectly. You blow up the reactor and see just how big the explosion was. That's another great thing about this game. The formula of the rebels taking out the big corporate empire is twisted a little bit. You killed a lot of innocent people when you destroyed that reactor. You could be considered even worse than the company who was making all the energy, Shinra. Now, I'm gonna stop the plot summary right there, because we'd be here all day if I went through all of it. But I loved how the heroes would go through so many lengths to stop Sephiroth, the true villain of this game, from destroying the world with a giant meteor. Time to address the elephant in the room. Yes, the graphics are horribly dated. Cloud's basketball forearms and shoulders connected by a straw is probably the best example. But does it matter? I have a joke with one of my friends that the better the graphics are, the better the game is, which is obviously false. I've gone around the internet and saw people hate Final Fantasy VII's graphics, but immediately call Ocarina of Time the greatest game ever made, which is pretty hypocritical. They're both great games, but they look pretty bad by today's standards. It's not the graphics that make both these games classics, it's their gameplay. Speaking of, the gameplay was something I had never seen before. Again, all I knew was the one-on-one battles of the Pokemon games, and to now control 3 people at once was pretty exhilarating. The active time battles always kept me on the edge of my seat, knowing that the enemy could launch an attack any moment while I was looking through my inventory or looking through my list of spells. And the materia system was so cool. Any character could use any spell and even link it to some others, making for many different combinations. I never really found random battles all that annoying, unless they happened over and over in a small area. And when they did, I could always run away or get some free experience. And the chocobo breeding I never really had a problem with. I actually found it somewhat enjoyable, and the reward at the end was 100% worth it. Another iconic aspect about the gameplay are the summons. They were so epic and can easily turn the tide of battles. To give you a sense of scale, Bahamut Zero flies around the planet of Gaia and nukes your enemies from outer space. Like, whoa. And let's quick talk about Aerith's death. I knew about it going into the game. It's all over the place. It might be the most iconic part of any Final Fantasy game. I see it as the Vader is Luke's father of video game plot twists. The scene itself is actually pretty bad, but with the floor changing colors and Sephiroth's glove having the ability to appear and disappear, among some others, but it still hits you hard. The last shot of saving the world was just killed, and a nice young girl was just killed also. I didn't cry or anything, but it was just sad to see her go, and she doesn't come back. Aerith is dead for the rest of the game. You can't talk about Final Fantasy VII without talking about the characters. All of them are extremely likable. From the loudmouth Barret to the kind-hearted Aerith, and just a quick side note, I prefer her name is Aerith. I don't call her Eris, but I hate the Aerith master race of people who demand her name must have the TH. Terra's name was Tina, and nobody's freaking out over that. Okay, ran over, I'm sorry. From the optimistic Tifa to the person who just wants you to sit down and drink your tea, Sid. And of course, the main character of the story, Cloud. Cloud nowadays is depicted as a depressed emo who's always suffering inside or whatever the crud. But in the original game, he was cocky and selfish. But deep down, he cared about his friends. He was lighthearted and fun. This is the Cloud that should be represented more. He's not a depressed, moody emo. Now, I'll be honest to myself. Final Fantasy VII is not the greatest game ever made. Crud, it's not even the best Final Fantasy. The translation's a bit sloppy, the graphics are pretty bad, etc, etc. But I just don't care. I finished this game about 2 months after I started it, and I had a blast. Final Fantasy VII told a very compelling story with an absolutely phenomenal soundtrack written by the legend himself, Nobuo Uematsu. Seriously, check out the soundtrack. Final Fantasy is probably my all-time favorite game at the moment. I say at the moment because that title is pretty subject to change. But it's been there for almost 3 years now. Final Fantasy VII is definitely not perfect, but I love it, and I always will. Now, will you guys stop being petty and subscribe again? I'll probably make a Star Wars video or something next. You guys seem to like that.